So as our beloved poet Maya Angelou says and wrote, "I come as one, but I stand as 10,000," and that is certainly true today for my talk on Black Twitter and participatory democracy in a new human rights movement. This is the anniversary of Freedom Summer 1964, which essentially changed the world, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And it's also the anniversary of the destruction of the Greenwood community in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921, 93 years ago. So in this presentation, we're going to go on an emotional roller coaster. Are you all ready? All right, so that is the residential community and the business district before the destruction. And this is what it looked like afterwards. And as you can see, especially because I'm going to talk about spelling, Running the Negro Out of Tulsa was proudly written by somebody who would probably be a guest on Fox News. But it was the worst case of domestic terrorism in the United States history. On one hand, the perpetrators were special deputies who were deputized by the Tulsa police. And on the other hand, and they pledged to uphold the law, and then they engaged in most of the destruction on the ground. On the other side, you have Buck Franklin, John Hope Franklin's father, who set up a tent and started he was a lawyer, to write out petitions for lawsuits. And so I think about that type of innovation, guns on the one hand and typewriters and tents on the other. And when we talk about tech innovation, I want to know, what are we disrupting? What's our philosophical base? Historian John Henrik Clarke tells us that we should use history the way we use a clock, to tell what time it is. African people, Black people, have always engaged in tech innovation, be it the ancient Egyptian sundial or 2 turntables and a microphone. Black Twitter is in many ways telling time. We have always embraced technology, always been creators of math and science, art. There's my tribute to the wonderful Pete Rock of Pete Rock and CL Smooth. But when we think about what I call the white gaze, I want us to remind ourselves, there has been and is an ongoing campaign to roll back the advancements of the civil rights movement, which laid the foundation for women's rights, gay rights, the rights of the physically challenged, the fundamental goal being to convince the American people and the world through America's largest export, culture, that the structural inequality we see, the system of white supremacy and misogyny we experience, is simply a result of cultural inferiority of the marginalized communities. So essentially, they're bringing it all on themselves. Which brings me to Pete Rock and the white gaze. American popular culture's construct is to make a sliver of Black culture the soundtrack of white productive or non-productive life. HBO, for example, wanted to attract more Black audiences to Game of Thrones, so they decided to make a hip-hop soundtrack, instead of a concerted effort to actually enhance the narrative and hire more Black actors and writers. And despite the fact that CNN did an entire special on Black in America, The Promised Land, Silicon Valley, in an almost unbelievable move in Mike Judge's Silicon Valley, also on HBO, the first, and now that the season has ended, only Black characters in a story about tech geniuses and productivity were a Black woman stripper and her Black male handler who had no lines, but of whom the mostly white males and token Indian dude were inherently afraid. Do better, Mike Judge and HBO. And in the news, mainstream media has been disproportionately closed and or underrepresenting Black people, people of color, and women. So inevitably, we were going to see emerging communities such as Black Twitter. Black Twitter is the way in which Black culture shows up on the social media platform we know as Twitter. The Pew Research Center says that while Black America makes up roughly 13% of the American population, we are 26% of the users on Twitter. Therefore, we over-index and show up in a public space in ways that have been largely unprecedented. America seems obsessed with Black Twitter's humor, which is excellent, but not all defining. So when Slate actually wrote an article in 2010, what Black people do on Twitter, it was largely around how hilarious the hashtags were at around midnight. When Whitney Houston died, this is, oh, I'm sorry, there's my brown Twitter bird. Thank you so much. That's Dr. Goddess. When Whitney Houston died, this is how the news was spread from Black Twitter. 2 people, as you can see. The Black Twitter network is actually very tightly interwoven and largely interconnected, more so than any other community on Twitter. So we did actually end up roasting Jaheim, who's an R&B singer that you may or may not know, who's wonderful actually. But he crashed Whitney Houston's funeral in this hideous purple suit. And so we did lambast him. And this is what it looked like when 26 members of Black Twitter roasted Jaheim and his suit, it was a hysterical moment. We also, I'll move on from that. I just like the fact that when we did the aggregate of words, this is what came up. And so most people don't associate like Black Twitter with like, music, just, life, and love. Yes? No? We also lambast people as Lovey does on dumbesttweets.com for not knowing how to spell. We created a multiplicity of language styles to amuse ourselves, shame the ignorant, and still promote excellent ideas. So you may actually see someone write out outfit to describe outfit, and it's as hideous as it sounds. But it has become a joke in and of itself. Black Twitter is responsible for the success of the web series Left of Black with Dr. Mark Anthony Neal and the initial success of the Melissa Harris Perry Show. Black Twitter is also responsible for the initial success of Scandal. But some of the most magical moments have occurred when Black Twitter harnessed its political power and organized among themselves, as well as influenced corporate power, the news media monopoly, and government accountability and public policy. But what is it that provided that power? My contention is that it's the availability of a free, largely democratic space that's easily accessible, is mobile-friendly, hello, thereby matching the user patterns of Black America and the African diaspora with the cultural norms, values, philosophies, oral and intellectual exchange among Black Americans and the African diaspora, often in direct opposition to mainstream America or in spite of our relative invisibility in large areas where our lives matter. It's also where Black genius lives, the genesis of Black cultural product and Afrofuturism, also largely invisible to mainstream America. Thus, we have Twitter user, Cocky McSwagalot. Her name is much better than mine. Also known as Morn Again, who was responsible for engaging in the research in and making the call to action to stop Juror B37's book deal after the Trayvon Martin verdict. She said that she didn't see herself as an activist initially. She made this call right in the middle of the conversation. The only thing I can think to do is flood Charlene Martin's phone, email, and snail mail with requests that she drop Juror B37. That sound good? That's a call. The response that she received produced this. You can tweet, email, snail mail, and call Charlene Martin to request she drop Juror B37, her contact info, as you can see the bit.ly link. She said that she saw an opportunity, and we can just see what she says. I was angry, and I didn't think it was right that someone would make money off of this tragedy, especially after they let Zimmerman go free. For the first time, it felt like I wasn't powerless. I was shocked because I didn't think the response from other tweeters would happen so quickly. I knew I was hurting and I needed this, but I didn't realize how much everybody else was hurting too. Do I want to be an activist? I don't know, she said. That's not what I had planned for my life, but this is definitely something that I am passionate about and something I feel like I can do to affect change. Morn Again at the time had only 1,600 followers, and overnight, she essentially quadrupled her followers, and now she has many more than that. Thus, what produced the power of Black Twitter bringing down Juror B37's book deal is what I believe Ella Baker advocated for us to practice during the 20th century civil rights movement, which is participatory democracy. Her story is, Morton Again's story is, symbolically a lot like that of Fannie Lou Hamer, who was a sharecropper in Ruleville, Mississippi, just minding her business when the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee encouraged her to register to vote. And when she did, she lost her job on the plantation and her housing. She then joined the movement and helped change the world. And this is a picture of her testifying at the Democratic National Convention in 1964. This woman who was essentially a quote-unquote nobody, someone that was invisible and untouchable, someone that sort of like Cocky McSwagalot wasn't really visible and active in the community. So her activism was based upon the actions of SNCC, which had formed out of frustration of their limited opportunities in the NAACP, and they were encouraged to form their own group by Ella Baker. You see, Black America must so often choose between the ratchet or the racist, between corporatized civil rights organizations that are willing to compromise the integrity of our communications and the foundation of our free speech, being neutral on net neutrality, or risk being marginalized and or truncated or misrepresented by mainstream organizations or causes. These are some of the ways that Black Twitter maximizes chatting. You may or may not have heard about any of these organized chats other than maybe has Justine landed yet and them thrones. Black Twitter is more than hashtag Paula's best dishes, although that was a good one and a hilarious time. But at the 50th anniversary of Freedom Summer, I dare you, I dare us to utilize, learn from, participate in, and organize with a section of Black Twitter that needs organizers, real allies, and the kind of partnerships and opportunities that create the direct action of Freedom Summer, which not only changed the state of Mississippi, but it also changed the entire world. If we could combine participatory democracy, culture, and a medium like Twitter, but certainly not limited to it, because this is not just about Twitter, we could do precisely what Black Twitter has been doing on a smaller scale with great possibilities, staging a new model for liberation in the 21st century. Freedom Summer did change the world. It set the stage for everyone to experience liberation. It challenged the privileged, be they white or Black, and from the North, to be engaged, to go to the deepest, poorest, most terrorizing place, the American South, in the blackest and poorest state, Mississippi, to make change for the most vulnerable, for institutions and themselves. Black Twitter is democratic in the sense that everyone has the opportunity to tweet, especially if there's a community building hashtag. Black Twitter is extremely irreverent and, quote, has no chill, which could sometimes be a problem, but when speaking truth to power is the essence of awesome. And combined with direct action, it not only stops book deals or shames racists, it mobilizes people offline to make real-world, long-lasting systemic change, be it a specific issue, overall awareness, and even electoral campaigns. So this is also Black Twitter. Freedom Summer in 1964, inspiring Freedom University in 2004. So as I conclude on this 50th anniversary of Freedom Summer, I just ask you to do what Maya Angelou asked us to do, and that is to dare to be intelligent. I will see you on Black Twitter. Thank you so much.